Hey, how's it going? Keith Townsend, the CTOadvisor.com. You're watching more coverage of Dell Technologies World 2019. I've been covering Dell Technologies World or Dell EMC World now for a couple of years. And the show has morphed into this thing where it was all speeds and feeds to something that is much more akin to a CTO level show where we're talking about overall capability. The theme of the show this year has been edge to core to cloud. We'll get into that with my guest in this sponsored podcast, Brian Henderson, Director of Marketing for Networking.
Yeah.
So that might come to a surprise to certain people. It might even come to a surprise to certain people within Dell EMC that Dell has not a small networking team and set of solutions. First off, from a high level, just give an overview of the range of products. Where do you guys start and where do you end?
Sure. So when it comes to networking, it's a little bit of a hidden gem within Dell, right? So people think of servers, they think of PCs,
right?
And then with the acquisition, I was a former EMC guy, so I go way back to the first Wizards conference before it was even EMC.
Before it was even EMC. I remember the Wizards conference.
Yeah. So I've been around a bit, and we've seen this massive transformation in the way, especially from then till now, and how people are using networks, right? So everything used to flow in from one big data center location with a big giant network stack. The hardware was tied to the software, and they were all kind of one, cohesive thing. The world's changed, and so we believe in this open networking philosophy where you can run other people's operating systems on top of the switch. So there's a lot of choice, and we embrace that open networking style across the whole portfolio.
Right.
So at the edge, we have a device that we just announced at the show called the SD-WAN Edge, and it's powered by VMware. So what we do is we take a piece of software called VeloCloud, which is one of the most popular SD-WAN pieces of software out there, and we run it on top of our virtual edge platform. And that's able to change how people are connecting to branch offices and how people are connecting their remote offices. Dell IT is, we drink our own champagne, so we use the same thing. At the core, there's a lot of switches, right? It's all about Ethernet switching.
Right.
And the way people are architecting Ethernet switches these days is more about east-west traffic, right? It's software defined and things like VxRail, HCI. You've got to move things back and forth versus a straight north-south orientation.
Right.
So what we have there, we just powered up the portfolio there. We just rebranded to Power Switch, and we have a Z series, we have an S series, and an N series. The Z series is really the big ones, right? They're 100 gig, 400 gig coming soon, and that is the spine or the fabric switches.
Right.
Big. Then you have your top of rack switches, which people traditionally hook up servers and HCI and things like that within the rack, and that's our S series. And then at the campus, we also have smaller switches, 25 and 10 typically. And those are called the N series, and those are much more affordable, and they go in smaller environments. So that's really a good perspective, edge, core, and then if we finish up the trifecta and we talk about the cloud, we're part of the Dell Tech Cloud validated designs.
Okay.
So when you see all this collaboration between VMware and Dell EMC coming together with software and hardware, it's really about making sure that there's simple networking that kind of connects it all. And we've got a really cool thing. I've got Smart Fabric here. And what Smart Fabric does is typically when you have HCI or VxRail, the networking was one of the last things that was kind of a little bit tricky to set up. And when people were doing early VxRail and early HCI implementations, the network was like the sticking point. We simplified that, so we automate all those steps. It's like 98% of the steps are now fully automated with Smart Fabric services. So our goal is to really simplify networking from edge to core to cloud.
So there's a lot to unpick there we'll start with we'll start at the edge.
Sure.
And let's talk about this VeloCloud partnership. This is something that, from a industry perspective, ever since the announcement, I kind of pushed Dell and Dell EMC networking and VMware on this concept. Man, VMware has these really cool software bits. Why can't we just see that on Dell hardware? That makes sense.
Yes.
So with the VeloCloud acquisition in the VMware business unit, we're starting to see some of that integration. Looks like, from an x86, it just kind of makes sense. Dell, one of the world's biggest x86 server vendors, would it make sense to put VeloCloud on that box, sell it as an appliance?
Yeah.
Oversimplifying it, or is that the solution?
Well, the edge is unique. So what we sell there is, it's almost like a networking optimized server.
Right.
It's not so much a switch, it's a network optimized server. And the VeloCloud by VMware, so it's kind of more of a VMware thing now.
Right.
It really simplifies how to set up a software-defined WAN. And
which has been a pain point. I managed a 120 site WAN before, and it was all VPN.
Yeah.
And a lot of time was just either doing troubleshooting, routing, etc. I look at the SD-WAN solutions on the market today. VeloCloud is one of the leading ones. VeloCloud by VMware.
Yeah.
It's one of the leading solutions, and I'm thinking, man, I would love to have had that.
Oh, yeah.
Now I'm buying it all in one solution from my Dell tech rep, basically.
Oh, yeah. And we work with a lot of the partners too. I mean, it's first and best typically with VMware, but Silver Peak, Riverbed. We have a network optimized server that runs all these SD-WAN and network function virtualization on that system. And what it's helping people do is, you probably experience this, is there's a lot of hardware sitting in all these remote offices.
Right.
And it's all kind of older, it's getting a little bit dusty. And a lot of these routers are just kind of coming up on end of life. And so what people are doing is they're saying, all right, do we refresh the router, or do we try something a little bit different? And we find these days people are really looking to get out of some of that hardware in terms of networking in that data center closet sitting in a branch office. So the SD-WAN Edge really lets people look at some of the other options as far as connectivity these days. So whether it's cell data, whether it's Wi-Fi, whether it's internet versus MPLS dedicated links, which are costing people 20 to 30 to 40,000 bucks a month, they're able to save a lot of money by shifting to this solution, and then have the software to kind of manage the SLAs and watch the performance.
In my experience has been that in the past, when I tried to reduce the cost of MPLS by going to VPN, I had all these problems that came along with it. It was management, it was class of service, it was all these things as a human I couldn't do, and software-defined networking kind of solves those problems in a bundle. So the fact that we're seeing more and more innovation in that area is great. So let's stay at the edge for a moment and kind of jump to where we talked a little bit about the cloud conversation with the campus. We think of the campus after the fact, once we've moved services to the cloud. I've had this conversation time and time again with customers where, they've had this, at the campus, they've taken this 3-stack approach to campus networks, because while we called it the campus, there was always compute there. There was always like servers, et cetera there. So there was a need to still have a core, a distribution layer, and an access layer. Now, we have these legacy network designs, and we find that we no longer use them anymore. They're no longer useful. So tell us about how the N-Series fits into solving that challenge.
Sure. So the N-Series, we like you said, there's always a need for a campus switch and an access class layer. And we find it's useful for a couple things, right? For the lower speeds, the affordability as well, and then the ability to connect up some of those other devices, whether it be firewalls, whether it be connecting into some of the wireless capabilities. So we do a lot of work with Aerohive and Ruckus, who are both great partners in that space. In fact, I just met with a customer right before this, which is why I was late.
So no problem.
And it was Mike Stanley from UTI, and he runs.
We just had Mike on yesterday.
Yeah. I just happened to catch up with him in the hallway. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And he was just talking about the value of having the switch to be able to hook in his wireless devices as well as his firewall to that. So it's always going to have a need for that space and something that's reliable and affordable. And that's one of the hidden benefits, I think, of the Dell networking. Again, people know it for servers and they know it for PCs. Storage with Dell EMC, I think, is fairly well known. But not a lot of people know about the reliability of Dell networking products.
So we'll pause to
Sure.
kind of take this in, because we've kind of created a solution all in itself within the Dell family at the edge, or the campus edge.
Sure.
We have SD-WAN
Yep.
to provide us access. So this is even if you're all cloud. SD-WAN to provide us access out to the cloud.
Yep.
We have the N-series switches to provide access from a just connecting my nodes and having some
Edge
level
to core
edge to core type
totally.
of connectivity.
Yeah.
And then what we haven't talked about yet is so far kind of the core of that picture that you painted.
Yes.
That edge to core to cloud.
Yes.
We've talked about the edge component. Let's talk about the core piece. There's plenty of people still with data centers.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And to your point, this east-west traffic is a new thing for us. Our desktops are now virtualized.
Yeah.
We have these huge applications that span across multiple nodes.
Yeah.
We're building clouds within our core. So we're taking VxRail, VxRack, et cetera, and building like this super dense computing.
Yeah.
How is Dell networking helping to solve some of those problems at the core?
Yeah, great question. So it's really the fabric that connects it all together, right? Without a very solid, high bandwidth, predictable, reliable network, none of this stuff works.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make sure, especially when we look back to things like storage, people love all flash storage because you didn't have to really worry too much about the tiers.
Yeah, it's just fast. All of it is fast. There is no tiers, right?
So with networking, it's very similar. It's if I can just hook up a very well architected leaf and spine network that's going to handle all my north-south, all my east-west. It's a big mesh fabric. Mm-hmm. And if you architect that the right way, it's going to have a future-proof and a future-ready kind of appearance to it. And what we're doing with the speeds of the PowerSwitch Z series as well as the S series, we're staying very close to the industry lead in those spaces, looking at different types of form factors. So we just released the industry's first 12-port 25 gig switch. And that's handy for some of these VxRail installations where you don't need a huge number of ports, but you need it to be fast.
You need a lot of bandwidth.
Yeah, a lot of bandwidth. Yeah.
Some of these servers with the new, I have to, when I tell the new Intel platform, I have to use Intel scalable, Xeon scalable platform, etc. Yeah. You can get several hundred virtual machines on a single node.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of I/O leaving a single server. So 25 gig is not unheard of from a single node.
Yeah, so exactly. So as the world gets more cloudy, more dense, more virtualized, a lot more traffic, east, west, north, south, the network has to be architected in a different way. And so when we look at customers with a traditional network architecture, they're all starting to see the value of having kind of a smarter monitoring layer, which can come from us and come from some of our partners, and just a really rock solid east-west fabric.
So let's talk about the true hidden gem, and I might do a little classic CTO advisor pushback in this area.
Sure.
The first of which is why do it.
Okay.
Then you can tell me why you guys do it. But this whole concept of open networking. When I go to an open network conference, Dell networking is like the premier hardware provider in these conferences. Like open source, when you think of open source, you don't necessarily think of Dell. However, when you think of when you're at an open source networking conference, Dell is the first hardware provider that you encounter.
Yeah.
Help me understand why Dell, because Dell already has a decent network operating system. Why invest in the challenges of embracing open networking?
Yeah, so there's really a couple sides to open networking, in my opinion. So you have open source and you have open networking.
Right.
So early on, as we were developing IP and developing partnerships, we felt like we really had to make sure that we're giving back to the community, real contributions to the community. We still do it to this day. And it was working with a lot of the larger hyperscaler providers out there that we saw the problem, and we just wanted to embrace it with a platform. One of our other analyst friends just said, you know, there's plenty of operating systems out there.
Right.
It would be nice to have just a solid hardware platform that supported them all. And so that was kind of the genesis of that, solving problems that the hyperscalers weren't seeing in other solutions at the time. And then we're seeing a lot of real incredible innovation on the software side from network operating systems. Big Switch, Cumulus, Pluribus. Those are probably the big three that we like to work with. And it's giving our customers a lot more choice. When they start to see the capabilities of that software, it's just kind of mind-boggling to them.
So let's talk about some of the operational advantages to running an open networking solution like Big Switch, Pluribus, or Cumulus on a platform.
Sure.
The reason why I mentioned open source is because this is Linux. So I'm running my network using the same, in theory, tools that I use to run my DevOps, networking, modern stack, the stuff that I'm doing in the cloud. I'm actually bringing that to my network. Let's talk about what are some of the cool things you've seen customers do with open networking operations.
So what we see a lot is open networking is, and each of the providers are a little bit different. So if you see, Big Switch is managing everything as one big switch. That's the name. So you're able to take all these switches, all the operating systems on that, and just really simplify that whole thing. What they're able to do is actually look at and just install the monitoring piece into a current existing network and radically change how they monitor and view the traffic and watch things as they flow through that, tools that they just don't have today. So a lot of the times just dropping that in to see what benefits you get. We've had customers that are like, this is incredible, you know, sign me up. So
wow.
So the viewpoint that they get.
So one of the concerns that I've heard with open networking has been support.
Okay.
Like if I buy my operating system from Big Switch, Cumulus, or Pluribus, I buy the hardware from Dell, and I have a problem, who do I call?
You call Dell. And that's one of the benefits. So we have a very established handoff process. Very smooth, very streamlined. We do a lot of joint collaboration with support and in engineering, a lot of cases too, to make sure that that's super smooth and streamlined. And we just never really hear complaints on that. Like, all right, I call in, there's no finger pointing. There's a very established process.
So this is not unlike what you guys already do on the server side. You know, if I can buy my licenses and support for Windows from Dell when I buy the server, and if I get a blue screen of death on my server, I can call the Dell support line, and I never talk to a Microsoft person. I talk to the same Dell person, whether it's a hardware issue or software issue. You guys figure it out.
Very good at doing that. And
so
we've been doing that the same exact model.
So I think we hit on everything that's new at the show. Did we miss anything?
Let me twist one little thing. So there's open networking. The other thing we offer is our own operating system. And so
can't forget about that.
So the one thing to mention is Smart Fabric Services is part of that. And so the real benefit there is for people that deploy our existing infrastructure, VxRail, Isilon, MX servers, and they're looking to simplify networking. We've automated a bunch of those steps. So when they deploy our own networking. And typically it's part of the package deal. You need a network anytime you're setting up VxRail or something like that. We automate up to 98% of those steps, and we make it really, really simple.
This has been one of my kind of things in my teeth. The thing that irritates me about HCI in the past is hyperconverged infrastructure with everything except for the network. It's been the traditional piece of hyperconverged. You get storage, you get compute, but networking was always an afterthought, and networking had always been a pain point and bottleneck for hyperconverged, whether it's running out of I/O because the two weren't validated together. So, the validated design for VxRail, VxRack, or the misconfiguration because, again, networking was a afterthought. So the ability to give that all-in-one solution in one stack, that we don't like the term one throat to choke anymore. But you know what? I'm an old school guy.
Aggressive.
Yes, but I'm an old school guy.
Yeah,
the one point of contact and one true point of contact. Where again, this is all stuff. So I'm really interested to see where the future is going when you guys continue to integrate VMware NSX, VMware VeloCloud, powered by NSX. I think is going to be the future name and the naming thing. All is all good. This stuff needs to become more black box. Dell and Dell Technologies is making it more black box. There's a larger ecosystem question, but again, we're sponsored by Big Switch in the next interview, so evidently there's room for partners as well. So we really appreciate all the work that's done. So that's it for this episode of the CTO Dose at Dell Tech World 2019. Follow us on YouTube. Visit our friends over at Dell Technologies to learn more about Dell networking and their other solutions. Talk to you next CTO Dose.